Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
So welcome to today's show. Very excited to have Mike Stevenson on from a company that really needs no introduction, DocuSign. DocuSign IPO'd in April of 2018, but prior to that, they have raised a phenomenal $537 million in funding, and post-IPO another 629, and their share price has really climbed from $24 to $39 the same day, and up around the $300 mark with phenomenal 60% year-on-year growth. Their Dublin office started out with 7 folks in a very first round hire to now being well over 450 employees with 4,000 worldwide. Mike has done the expat thing in EMEA piece, which we've covered on prior shows, but Mike has been here for almost 3 years and now relocated back to North America. He has run the biz dev team, and we're going to dive right into that and learn from the experience that he's witnessed here. But first and foremost, welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Ross and John. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Look, let's get stuck in. Take us through your career so far to date, if you would, maybe your college experience, your first roles, and what led you to be RVP, and what's the path to get there, and what are some of the junctures and inflection points along the way, if you could share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and it's a great school out of Los Angeles where I actually met my wife. So I really enjoyed my time there. One of the things I did at the end of my tenure was I really wanted to study abroad. And so but I didn't want to miss my time at university because I was having so much fun. So I decided to study abroad actually the quarter after I graduated. So it didn't really count towards my diploma or any credits there. But I knew I wouldn't be missing out on any good times at UCLA. So I ended up going to Buenos Aires and studying Spanish. My soon-to-be wife also ended up on the same program. So that was really fortunate. And so we were in Argentina learning Spanish, getting the opportunity to travel and really enjoying the experience. I think we took tango classes, we traveled to Uruguay, Chile, and just really enjoyed being on the cusp of entering the workplace and future adult-related responsibilities. Sure. While I was there, those are weighing on us a bit. But while I was there, and why I bring this story up, it was right when the financial crisis started to have an impact on banks and the job market. We were seeing all this news through the lens of Buenos Aires. That was, we're seeing the news basically. It's English news, but it's also have headers and taglines in Spanish. And we're seeing this, and I'm thinking, I'm eventually going to come back to the United States, and I'm going to be one of these people looking for a job. My heart was slowly sinking, and I tried to really enjoy the moment, but it was certainly weighing on my mind that we were in this financial crisis. Jobs were getting eliminated, companies were going bankrupt, and I was going to get going in the workforce right at that time. So when I came back, I obviously had that anxiety weighing on me, but I also had this other competitive fire in my belly as I saw some of my colleagues, former classmates, start to get promoted in their current roles. They've been graduated, only since June, and I'm back in November, but they're either getting promoted or celebrating some success they'd had on LinkedIn. And I could just feel this fire in my belly that I felt behind. I felt like I needed to get ahead, and I needed to do something that could get me further and faster in my career. And the go-to career for that really is sales. You put your success into your own hands. It's very much a meritocracy, work hard and deliver results, and then you're rewarded in terms of career advancement. And so I really narrowed in on the sales field and got into one of the few sales jobs at the time, given that it was a very interesting market. And it was selling a product that was a bit of an innovative voice over IP sort of telecom solution that bundled in a lot of IT solutions that were really new at the time. And this is 2008, when most businesses had hardly a website. They weren't really using email to the full capability. They might have had an AOL email address. And so this company, CBeyond, integrated a lot of those into this voice over IP managed IT services bundle for small, medium businesses. But make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was a turnover, high burnout type of sales role. The one where you're calling 40 dials in an hour, and you're knocking on doors and shaking hands and getting a lot of rejections. So I think the average tenure in that company was 6 to 9 months for sales reps. It was a lot of burnout. But I entered it. I committed myself to the year. I said, no matter what, I am going to be here a year. I'm going to do everything they tell me. I'm going to work really hard. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But it won't be because I didn't leave everything on the table. And fast forward a year, I had achieved pretty good success in the position, sold some meaningful sized deals, and really developed a good brand, and started to think, what's next here? I set this 1 year mark for myself, and I hit that year. I kind of had this existential crisis. Okay, cool, you made it. You never really planned past this point, but you're here. So what now? And that's when I started to get the bug to get into leadership. And that's when I started to make inroads towards being a team lead, and then eventually a sales manager. And from there, I ended up being a sales manager for the next 5-6 years with that company, managing a team of AEs who are selling into the small, medium-sized business space, and really loved it. What I loved was the ability to have an impact on someone's early sales career. And a lot of salespeople come in, they have high ambitions, but not a lot of skills and not really the roadmap to get there. And so the trials and tribulations early in someone's sales career are high. There are a lot of highs, there are a lot of lows. And I felt like being able to coach somebody through those and be really counselor, mentor, sales coach, cheerleader, all these things all together in one was a really great way to develop a strong relationship with someone. And that's absolutely true. I mean, I'm looking back on one of my first sales teams from 10 years ago, and I'd absolutely call any one of them up, and we'd have a great conversation, and potentially even go work for each other at some point, if our stars aligned. So I think that really resonated, was really true. And so I saw that and did that for the next 5 or 6 years. But as CBeyond grew and the world changed from a technology perspective, CBeyond aimed to evolve to being more of a cloud type company. They're really trying to be an Amazon Web Services competitor. And I share this story because this is a similar transition that DocuSign's going through in our transition to the Agreement Cloud. I think it's something that a lot of sales organizations go through at some point as the business decides to evolve to a different vision, one that's more future facing and is looking towards where the market's headed. And that's what CBeyond is doing, rather than focusing on this sort of voice over IP IT managed services solution, which was even then becoming a bit more outdated as companies got up to speed on building their own websites, getting their own email servers, having BlackBerry servers. That's right, BlackBerry was big at the time. And so they started to move towards the cloud environment. They wanted to compete with Amazon Web Services. And we made that transition, I'd say, really bought into it fully, not just from a product and market fit standpoint, I think also from a career perspective. I knew that that's where the market was headed. And if we could be experts in selling it, then we would be really great assets to the job market beyond this company. And though they didn't really achieve the level of success that I think the executives were looking for, we did start to make some inroads. We were really competing against Amazon Web Services, and just they beat us many times, and that's where the company was sold. So I was faced with a crossroads of where to go with my career, and jumped into DocuSign. It was a bit of a no-brainer to come into a company that had such a smooth and easy value proposition, one where customers actually liked talking to you, where they talked really positive about your service. We used to have this saying that no news was good news at CDON, but at DocuSign, it's just such a different experience. People saying, "Oh, I love your product. This is great. I want to think about how to do more." And that whole transition was something I'd never experienced before. It took me even a few months to wrap my head around that, and so. Was able to get into work with DocuSign, and I made a bit of a career transition. I'd been managing sales teams and working with AEs who into the full sales cycle. So though I was aware of what it took to generate leads from an outbound perspective, it really, I was managing the 0 to 100% of the sales cycle. It wasn't my primary focus. But I took the opportunity to get into DocuSign in SaaS, and it was really heavily focused on lead generation through the trial motion to jump into running an SDR team there. And the SDR team at the time was 32 people. And I have to say, coming from this environment where we were kicking, scratching, and clawing for every lead, every conversation we could have, coming into this environment where all of a sudden we had more leads than we could even follow up with. It just blew my mind. How could we be in this situation? It took me probably 5 or 6 months to really wrap my head around how there were leads we didn't call. Now, I eventually, learned that there is a lead prioritization model, and really not everyone is the right fit for that conversation to get to a commercial plan. But it was a really cool role to get into, because again, going back to what I loved about managing a sales team, these are people really early in their sales career. They're eager for coaching, they're eager for guidance, they're very receptive to it. And so you get this opportunity to shape somebody's career and have great relationships with them that really last a long way. And then another example, I've come back to the US after being gone for 2.5, 3 years, and I actually have some people on my team now that I hired 6 years ago. And so it's really funny to see that come through full circle.
Wow. Okay. So let's dive into some of that. So you were leading the SDR team, and then you flipped to move to Europe, specifically to Dublin. So that brings forth, and for any of our listeners who don't know, DocuSign is firmly in the rocket ship category. So you've obviously gone from massive scale in the US to Europe, to coming to Dublin, which is a premier location for US tech, as everyone probably knows. But I'm curious to know, first of all, what was the cultural shift that you kind of experienced? There's practicalities of moving to Dublin that I'm curious about, but also what was your big learnings throughout the process of figuring out EMEA versus the US, and you're kind of a more of a homogeneous versus heterogeneous market? Maybe if you could share some insights there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came into DocuSign Dublin, which is headquarters, our EMEA office, May 2018. And in the lead up, part of the decision to go there was this consistent theme that we heard from the executives on calls, either internal or, as we went public, external, about this the power of our international expansion and the motion and the investment that was happening there. So when I decided to come over, it was a big part to be part of that international growth, that rapid growth that we were forecasting to have. And I had a conversation with the VP GM at the time, Ronan Copeland, and I said, Ronan, what are you looking for out of people to come here? And he said, we're looking for builders, and we're looking for people who can really deal with the fast-paced environment that we have here in Dublin, and specifically, in our EMEA office. And I thought to myself, great. I've been at DocuSign now at this point for 4 years. It's, this rocket ship in North America too. And we've been building everything from scratch here. So I'll head over there. I've got that experience, that know-how, and that'll be that. But as I've told Ronan, I should have heeded what he was saying a little bit more. Getting into the Dublin office in EMEA, I felt, even coming out of North America, it was like jumping on a treadmill going at full speed, and you're at a medium jog. It just, your body arches, you get thrown forward, and you're thinking, wow, this is going at a speed I couldn't even fathom. So it really was a quick adjustment to a whole different pace of business. And I think one of the things that, we say it a lot in the States, and you hear it a lot in Europe as well, is when you have both entities on a call. A lot of times you hear an American colleague refer to Europe. Like, well, when we do things in Europe, and Europe isn't Europe. It's not one thing. I think coming from the US, we're used to this model of the United States. We have all these states, whether it's Alabama, Texas, Indiana, California, Oregon. They're all different. They have unique things going. They have slightly different rules. They have, potentially different tax rates. But all in all, you can cross the borders. You can do business. You have this federal umbrella that makes it, all speak the same language. All have pretty similar buying motions and trends. So we think of sometimes Europe in a similar type of mindset. Well, we've got these states here like Germany and France and the UK, but you can't think of it like that at all. It is completely unique entities. And so as much as we were building in the US, we were building for a party of one, in English, go-to-market strategy for one country, one entity. And we weren't changing, well, when you talk to somebody on the East Coast, do this differently. It's not like that. So when you're scaling and building for scale in the US, it's simpler than in EMEA for that very reason, where in EMEA, you're trying to grow, and we were trying to grow 4 core markets, France, Germany, Benelux, and the UKI. And as we were doing that, that's 4 different languages, it's 4 different go-to-market strategies, it's 4 different sets of partner relationships that have different structures. And so adapting to that meant that we had to go at an even faster pace than we did in the US, because the expectations for growth were, similar to what they had been in the US at the growth point, but we had to go to market in 4 different core markets. And so that meant just building and scaling at a lot of added complexities inserted there.
How do you ensure, Mike, that you set the right expectations with either the executive team, leadership team, or the board over in the USA, who, in my experience, sometimes really just don't have a deep pedigree in international expansion? What things, or how did you ensure you managed those expectations correctly?
Well, John, I think that was a bit of my superpower. And I'd love to take a credit for it as if I did something. But I think just naturally it was, I was in a good place, because here I was, an American, been working in Dublin DocuSign for 4 years. And then I come over to Europe. So a lot of these things that we'd hear from our European colleagues on certain calls, we'd be on a call, I would have the head of sales development at the time from EMEA there, and then we'd have myself representing sales development in the US, and that we'd be talking about things, and where the European colleague would say, never, like, you can't do that here, it's just different. And coming from the US lens, it was like, really, is it? How different is it? And I don't know if that always resonated as much, because we just don't have the frame of reference in the US. Like, our comparison is just different. And we think of it, again, sort of like that Alabama, Texas, Indiana type example. But for me, getting into EMEA, when we get on those same calls, I was an American who'd been working for 4 years in the US. So I was talking to people where I'd been that American colleague. I'm talking to our go-to-market team, and I'd been the person in the US advocating for something that arguably may not have worked in the same way in EMEA. So now when I'm on the call and saying, hey, I actually live here, I'm here every day, I see this, I do this, we can't do it that way. I think that did really add a lot of credibility to that voice. But I can completely understand the basis of the question, which is it can be challenging, because we were hearing similar things while we were hearing similar things before I moved over there. And I think when I was there, I just added this, like, hey, I've worked with you before, this sort of collaborative voice that was just different, right? And that really, I think, helped in framing up some of the challenges that we have in Europe that you just don't have in going to market in the US.
That's very interesting, because it's not just sales, is it? It's marketing as well. I mean, try telling, when you're building motions for certain territories and sales plays, try telling someone in the USA that nobody in Germany gives a shit about the Super Bowl. The icons and kind of all that stuff is sometimes does not resonate in the European market because it's very American. Some of the collateral, some of the stuff with images and pictures of the Super Bowl, people touching down stuff, and although it's improving. I mean, there's such an uptick in people watching American sports now in Europe. It's absolutely phenomenal compared to, say, 5 years ago. But that's very interesting, kind of the way you describe that, because that would be my experience from working with some American organizations where, some sales directors, some sales managers would make their way over from the US into Europe. And I think it's highly effective, to kind of be the glue between those two organizations, because you have the upside of kind of sending someone who knows and understands the business like you. And you mentioned earlier that if, a few of the SDRs you hired in the early days are now on your team, which is great. So if you look at that in the context, if you look at it in the context that A-player SDRs are tomorrow's rock star account executives, then you need to make sure that you hire correctly, or that you really hire right. So in your view, what separates SDRs who are kind of ringing the gong in success from those who are, pounding the phone in frustration?
Yeah, and you bring up the SDR hiring is arguably more challenging than some of the more tenured roles that you hire for because of the lack of work experience.
So sorry, when I say SDR, and I meant to clarify this, is SDR, your understanding, is that inbound or outbound? Does an SDR do inbound or outbound or both?
Yeah, so good. So we had in EMEA 3 roles: ADR, SDR, and MDR. ADR was similar to the BDA function at Salesforce. It is basically going out, getting contacts, and doing a lot of the work that sets up our outbound teams for success. We would refer to the outbound team as MDR, and then our inbound teams would be SDR. So the typical progression path would be ADR to SDR to MDR to SMBAE.
Very good. Yeah, I like that, because and again, I'm going to ask you this question in a second, not to preempt it, but I'm sure RevOps or revenue ops is extremely pivotal and important in that whole setup there. But so like what are you looking at? Like, so what separates highly successful SDRs, BDRs, ADRs, whatever you want to call them? What's the difference between kind of the really successful ones and the ones that aren't so successful? And not necessarily, in your organization, but in general, what do you think is the difference there? What can make the difference?
Yeah, I really think that motivation and hunger is so critical at that juncture, because we're not hiring for skills that somebody has today. We're hiring for their attitude and their willingness to go out and get those skills.
Very good.
So when you think about the people that you're looking to hire, we would look a lot at their past history, you haven't been in sales before. That's fine. In fact, arguably better, because you're more moldable. But have you shown that you're perseverant in the face of adversity? Do you look at somebody telling you no, and it makes you want to work harder? Is rejection a motivator for you? Or, are you very competitive? And we look for things in people's CVs and in the interviews that would indicate that they had that appetite, that they saw long-term vision in sales, and that they were impatient to get there. And also, they were willing to leave their ego at the door, because the other thing we wanted to make sure is we're hiring people that are eager to learn, grow, and finding people who part of their superpower is just the humility of what they know and they don't know, so that they'll be willing to go out, get the knowledge, learn and grow, as opposed to resting on their laurels and assuming they've sort of made it. It's that growth mentality that we were looking for.
Yeah, and I think I'd probably add, in terms of those competencies that you're describing, I'd probably add, do they have the ability to actively listen as well? Because there's so many, and I see it, so many SDRs are so well versed in the features and attributes of a particular solution, but they're not really great at kind of listening to what the prospects are really saying. To kind of read between the lines and ask the appropriate questions to move the conversation forward, that kind of thing. I think also the performance conditions are important, aren't they?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, the question really was around, what separates kind of good SDRs from, kind of SDRs that aren't necessarily doing a great job. So my view is that the people that are doing it really well have really good performance conditions, like their onboarding is high, high class, and, they kind of educate everybody really well on their personas and their motivations and the buying journey, and they really have a supportive team, and it sounds like you guys have that in abundance, but the performance conditions, talk to me a little bit about that. How important is that, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was really how we scaled, was finding what those performance conditions were that worked, and then really systematizing them. I mean, the very simple one that you just pointed out was onboarding.
Right.
And, if you hire the right people, hungry, motivated, willing to learn, they're going to listen, they're going to lean into new knowledge, then all you need to do is you need to build the path to their success and surround them in the kind of way where they're super supportive. They have everything that they need, both from a knowledge of the product, sales skills, and then a support environment from your manager to your team. And I'll touch on those. The onboarding piece, we really wanted to make this programmatic. Sometimes I think we've all been in that situation where Monday comes around, you just coming out of the weekend, you had a good weekend and you're trying to get back into work mode, and it's 8 a.m. on a Monday, and you think, oh wait, so-and-so's starting today. Oh gee, okay, am I ready for them? What are we gonna have them do? And they show up and you just feel behind from day one and trying to get them onboarded and ready to go. And we really wanted to get away from that feel. We want to give our sales leaders all the tools that they need so that on day one, they are not wondering, what am I going to do to onboard this person? Am I going to sit in a one-to-one with them in an hour and just splurge everything that I think that they should know? No, we're going to miss things. There's going to be gaps. It's less effective. So we put together a onboarding plan that was really, it's basically day by day what each person had to do. And kudos to Madison Friday, who was our program manager. She was actually an MDR manager. We moved her into this program manager role because she was so passionate about building the systems for success. And I got to say, it was one of the best things we did to scale effectively, to sort of take somebody who'd been in the motion, leading a team, and put them in a process building type of role and position, because she built out so many of the processes from an onboarding and an ongoing enablement perspective that then our management team really could focus in on the strictly on the implementation and sharing those trainings as opposed to the building of them.
How do you know that? How do you know that your onboarding is successful? How do you measure that? What are one or two of the key things that you look at and you say, yeah, we're on track here, or we're off track, or that was successful, or that wasn't successful? How do you do that?
Well, we entered with, I think, 70% of our BDRs were achieving target in their ramp period. Or actually, let me rephrase that. Our ramping BDRs were achieving at an aggregate level 70% of the ramp target that we had set for them. And we knew
Sounds to me like the target's too low.
Maybe. I'm not one who's going to be ever arguing for more.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. So some folks use kind of time to first appointment and all that kind of jazz. I was just curious kind of how you guys did it, but wow, that's quite a statistic, 70%.
Yeah, well, so that was our baseline. So basically, so if our team had a target of, let's say, 100 opportunities for these ramping reps, the ramping reps are doing 70. And like DocuSign's model, the pipeline model is built so at an aggregate level, the team's hitting 100. Because if they're not, then we're not delivering the pipeline that the AE teams need. So essentially, this was sort of like a C-. It was a poor grade. And so we tasked Madison with bringing it up to 100. Within a quarter, she was able to do that by implementing those programs. And we continue to iterate on them. And of course, the quotas go up and things like that. But I think building that process it was a very one-to-one relationship with why we saw that attainment increase.
So okay, again, I'm blown away by that number as well, and the fact that you've been able to enrich that from 70 to 100 is testament to your sales enablement piece, your coaching, your process, your platform as well. But I guess if we could just go back to the stat as well, it stuck out in my mind is that when you started, you grew from 44 to 170, right? So that tells me you're clearly good at hiring. So my question is, in the hiring process, what is it you're looking for? And give me an example of a question that you insist is asked and maybe the best answer you've ever heard to identify this guy or gal is a potential rock star going forward.
Yeah, and I think so your question is about hiring BDRs or pre-sales reps.
Yeah, no, it's like SDR, MDR, EBR. Like when you see somebody and you've asked them a question, they answer it in a very sophisticated way, but maybe there's an intacit, glint in their eye, etc., or there's a tonality in their voice. They're answering the question the way you want to hear the answer, but what is that kind of X factor that comes out for you, or maybe a cited example? Talk to me a bit about that gets you excited about a hire.
Yeah, and there's one question in particular that I think if candidates answer in one way in particular, I feel I'm very motivated to hire them, assuming all the other pieces add up. And that is, can you tell me about a failure that you've had? And the way that somebody answers that question is really important, because you can just tell me about the failure, right? You can tell me about a time when something didn't really go your way. That's one answer. Somebody could potentially tell me about something that doesn't really feel like actually a failure. It just feels like they're softballing the question and they're avoiding something deeper. But there was one lad in particular who answered the question. It was a GAA guy, and he was talking about how he didn't make his local team one year, and he talked about it from this perspective of, it was a deep learning moment for him. He had some confidence going into sort of tryouts or however that goes about, and he was let down. He just, his own expectations for himself and what the answer was going to be in terms of whether you make a team. He didn't make the team, and what he did after was really why I was saying this is the X factor we're looking for. Is he spent the entire next year preparing, waking up early, lifting weights, running, working. I think he had an older brother who was on the team, and working with him to get really prepared for the next year's tryouts. Nice. And then in the subsequent year, he tried out and he made the team. And that sort of completion of that story. Here's your failure. Here's your learning. It makes you, angry is not the right word, but really motivated. That just turns a bolt in your brain, and you think, now I want it more than ever. And you work even harder, and you come back the next year at an even better place than people made the team. And that's what he had done. And it's been a really successful. I think he's actually an AE now, but he hit the ground running, and again, you're going to get those kind of failures in sales. You're going to have the slumps. You're going to have the bad months. It's the people who turns that bolt in their brain and makes them want to work harder and do more. Those are the people that have a lot of long-term success.
Well, more importantly, it sounds like he, took ownership of that in terms of kind of what he has to do, as opposed to kind of blaming somebody else for not making the team. I think that's hugely important, that you kind of look for somebody that has an internal locus of control, that, isn't blaming everybody else and every other, they didn't like me because I wasn't tall enough, or because this, or because that, or, the condition, because the performance conditions aren't always going to be fantastic. And if someone has the ability to say, you know what, I'm in control of what I do, and this is what I'm going to do, and I think that's an extremely astute kind of insight there for our listeners. To be honest with you, Mike, that that's a really wonderful kind of question to ask somebody and get somebody to talk about an area where they weren't successful. I think that's a good thing to do.
Completely, John. It's personal accountability is what it comes down to. I read a recent book by Jocko Willink called Extreme Ownership, the former Navy SEAL, and literally spoke to me around that. I mean, you can decide that the world's beating you up and shut the curtains and close up shop, or you can say, I'm going to use this for what it actually was given to me for, to become better. And I think that's exactly it.
Yeah, because that's not an easy job. It's like that entry level job where you're going in and you're trying to convince somebody that either sometimes isn't even expecting your call, or trying to do that, and to do that multiple times, to get knocked back multiple times. It's not an easy job.
No, absolutely not. And you guys are totally right. That self-reflection isn't something that everybody has. The ability to look back and say, well, if I could have done this better, then I would have made the team. And then to make the changes to do that and become better, that that little kick, that motivation. I think that's a really good call out, Ross and John, on the extreme ownership piece. To the self-reflection and the self-ownership as well, really key.
So I have two more questions, Mike. I suppose the first one is, you've done, you've achieved what we speak to people on a regular basis about. Namely, we speak to a lot of sales leaders, CEOs, who are considering internationalizing. They're on the cusp of it. They're at a Series B, or a funding round where PE or VC backers are saying, this is the next step for you. You need to do the whole international thing. Maybe just share with us, what were some of your biggest takeaways from that adventure you went on? And what do you think you could, convey to others to do in that circumstance?
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up, because I had a conversation with a former boss of mine who's looking to do just that. And the main thing that I shared with him as my observation is really to come into EMEA with focus, and not, while big and broad ambitions are something that we all in software and tech tend to have. Come in with focus. So where is your land, and where will you be hyper focused in on? I think it's easy to, and this was my advice to him, is he was looking at going to market in Germany, France, Netherlands, UK, Spain, and Italy right from the onset. And if it may be a B2C product, that's something that could work. I think for the B2B motion, as I told him, was, hey, maybe start with the UK, where you have assets in English already, and start to focus in on that, so you can build that play as you're looking to build out some of the other markets. But my advice to him, and I would say to anyone looking to do that EMEA strategy and EMEA growth, is really take that focus piece. Where are you going to have the wins that are going to get you some notoriety and some positive recognition and some good customer stories early? Can you focus in on those and start there? If that's something you have the ability to do with your expectations for the market, I think that's a much better way to build a strong foundation as opposed to try to take the elephant down all in one bite.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you've got to scale out organically in markets where you can do so. I mean, the UKI kind of makes sense from a linguistics perspective, from a cultural perspective. I suppose just finally, as we wrap up here, Mike, I suppose as the only English-speaking country, bar maybe arguably Malta and Cyprus, left in the European Union, we speak a version of English here, but I'm keen to understand the crack, spelled C-R-A-I-C, not the narcotic variety. What struck you about that? What was your experience of Irish culture and why we're a bit different? We feel we get work done, we're serious about work, but we don't take ourselves all that seriously in the process. But what was your direct experience of Irish culture, if you could be so bold to share with us?
Yeah. I mean, Ireland and Dublin is great crack. And I do mean the Gaelic version of that word.
Yep.
Yeah, I was chatting with somebody about this yesterday. They were asking what was it like over there. And I said that, without a doubt, the thing that you have when you get over there is a feeling of welcome. And you don't have that in every country that you travel to. You go to some countries and sometimes you feel like, is this okay for me to be doing? Is it okay for me to be here? And you just never have that in Ireland. There's such a feeling of welcome. And that's why you see so many expats there. You see so many international people that came for 6, 12 months and they're there for 10 years. That was half my management team in EMEA was people from Spain, Italy, the US, and the story was the same. I came here for a year, I've been here for 10. And it's because of that feeling of welcome and the ability of the culture to just adapt, I think, to new surroundings and an evolving tech scene that's changing rapidly, and yet just always be entering the day with a smile and the right kind of attitude. Honestly, it's just the perfect attitude for sales too.
Fantastic. No, I love hearing that as, patriotic person, etc. Obviously selling the platform, but at the same time, to have that firsthand experience of someone who's lived it is hugely valuable. Look, I really want to thank you, Mike, for your time and attendance today on the call. It's added tremendous value to our listeners and appreciate it. And if it's okay with you, we might have you back on in the future if you're up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great crack.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.